Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I am your host, Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the exponential success coach. Today, I have with me a pharmacist, a salsa dancer, and a conflict resolution coach. It is not three people I have with me. Today, I'm really excited. I have Jerry Fu with me today. It's Dr. Jerry, isn't it? If you're a pharmacist.
Technically, yeah. I don't. I should leverage the title more often, but I don't. So it's okay.
All right. Well, Dr. Jerry Fu. I also found out that you're a bicyclist. Like you go on bike tours. So not just salsa dancing, but you keep yourself pretty active. We're going to talk mostly about conflict resolution and leadership today. That said, you don't just land in conflict resolution. You don't just land there, nor do you come out of being a pharmacist to become a conflict resolution coach. So I'm curious, Jerry, about all of that. I'm curious about your journey. Where'd you start? I know you're in Houston, Texas today. Where'd you get your start? How did you decide, I think I'll be a pharmacist? Because you don't just wake up and decide that one day.
Yeah, it's not on the list of like firefighter or astronaut or other noble elementary school callings. It started, and just this is the hook, I guess. It started when I got a C in organic chemistry in college. And yeah. And I was kind of pre-med by default, basically. And, I had lots of family members who were doctors, including my grandfather, who had practiced medicine in Taiwan for over 50 years. So big standard to hold up to. And he wanted to see me, his oldest grandson, become a physician. So sorry, Grandpa. And among other things, right? So like my major is like process of elimination. Well, can't do econ, can't do business, can't do, don't like all these other things. So biology, sure. And so, yeah, after the C in organic chemistry, I said, well, I still want to do healthcare of some kind. So I said, well, if I'm too embarrassed at the risk of getting rejected by med school, what other professions could I try? So I convinced pharmacy school I would make a good pharmacist. And so I went off to pharmacy school. So to kind of give some geographical background, I was in Tennessee for a good chunk of my life. I finished high school there. And then I came to Houston. My first stint in Houston was for college. And so I was at Rice. And that's where I got humbled and chose pharmacy. Moved back up to Tennessee, specifically in Memphis, to finish pharmacy school. And then after I finished pharmacy school, moved back to Knoxville, where my family was, and I worked for a chain pharmacy for about 5 years. And this was a tough decision initially because my parents, who are immigrants from Taiwan, were insistent that me working for this chain pharmacy was the stability that my dad never had in his career, having 2 master's degrees, one in computer science, one in chemical engineering. And so they said, hey, work for them for 20 years, bank away money aggressively, and then maybe one day you'll finally, have the autonomy you want in your life. And after 5 years, they said, nope, I can't. I'm not interested in playing your long game. Like, this is no longer something that is acceptable to me. And so when I decided on something else, I said I wanted to get into teaching students, but since I didn't have a conventional doctorate or a residency to get into pharmacy school teaching, a friend of mine who was kind enough to help me get the chance to interview for a teaching position through a pharmacy consulting company that I moved back to Houston for. So 13 years ago now, I moved back to Houston to take on this job. Thought it'd be the last job I ever needed until I got fired 11 months later. And that was the first reality check, because at my chain pharmacy job, even if I messed up or even if I slacked off, they would be mad at me, but they knew I was better than like 70% of the workforce. So they were like, well, he's not pulling his weight entirely, but we know overall he's a good worker. So we're just going to have to tolerate this. But when I worked for the smaller company, I learned quickly, and it took me a long time to appreciate this lesson, is that they're not paying you to give you stories as to why you didn't get the job done, why it's like their expectations were too high. They're paying you to get the job done. And so after 11 months of very generous time of trying to get me to see this light, they said, no, you got to go. So First reality check. The second reality check happened when I stumbled into another job 6 weeks later where 4 of my paychecks bounced, filling for crooked doctors. And so not only was I jeopardizing my license, the guy wasn't even paying me. And, how do you confront a guy who's clearly ripping you off? They don't teach you this, right? And so, again, after chasing a couple paychecks while hoping that I didn't get in too much trouble, my friends got me out of that job with a company that was more legitimate, but couldn't pay me more than 8 hours a week. And so I said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you can get more hours if you cover at our Austin location. And so I said, well, beggars can't be choosers. So, and I could end up in worse cities. So I just went out there and worked for a little bit. No idea what my life was going to look like. And then that summer, this is 2012 now, that summer was key because some friends of mine who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit said, hey, we know you've been facilitating workshops on the pharmacy fraternity side, but one of our leadership facilitators backed out. Can you help present this material? And I said, absolutely. And so teaching leadership helped kind of change my thinking around whether or not I could become a good leader or an effective one. Because before I just didn't believe it was possible. I didn't like confrontation. I didn't think I could ever be good at it. And now after teaching leadership material, I said to myself, well, what if I could be a good leader? What would that look like? How would I carry myself? What kind of work would that involve? And so when a full-time manager position opened up in Houston, I said, yeah, I want to sleep in my own bed again. I want to take on this challenge. I can't stay safe. It was a great team in Austin, but I knew I couldn't afford to just stay scared. So I said, yeah, I want to take on this challenge. And when the company had their funding pulled the following year, just the owners decided it was no longer a viable option for them. The only reason to get an opportunity to interview with my next company was that I had leadership experience on my resume. So I tell people all the time, leadership saved my career. And even then, the job options that opened up for me weren't very sustainable. They would die after like 1 or 2 years just because the business models didn't hold up well against competition. And so about 6 years ago now, I said, well, I'm tired of chasing scripts from other doctors. I'm tired of fighting insurance companies that dictate my worth. But I love this people development thing. What if I tried to make a career out of coaching and facilitating? And still very scared of failure and rejection. So it was just an occasional hobby until I was in the middle of my formal coach training when the pandemic hit. And then from there, I said, how much longer am I going to put up this dream? So that's how that started. And the specific focus on conflict resolution is, if you can't already pick up on it, it's a personal struggle. One where I've had to deal with a number of situations where not having the difficult conversation was holding me back. And I didn't want to admit that until the consequences got too severe. And so some of the situations I've had to deal with that kind of made me realize I had to make this, a focal point was that, I had to evict a roommate at one point, and that wasn't fun. At one point, I served as a Sunday school class director, and my second day on the job, I found out that a newer guy was sexually harassing women in the class, and they told me, Jerry, you're director, you got to go handle this. And of course, they have me. There's no manual for this, So, and so I just realized, I think I have a heart for Asian American leaders who are going through these similar struggles where they realize, hey, you know what? I have a boss that's really treating me poorly. How do I confront them without possibly getting fired? I have direct reports who don't seem to respect me. When I tried to hold them accountable, how do I do it in such a way where they would actually take me seriously? So, we like to joke. Sometimes you choose your niche, sometimes it chooses you. And so in this case, it's more about, I didn't want to pick this pain point, but now I struggled with it so long it actually became fascinating. So I think that's the journey.
I was taking notes along the way. This is your journey is so important, and there are several pieces that I want to reflect on for you and for our audience. Right, that you set down this path, and there are people in your life, typically parents, grandparents, who have expectations for you. And at some point you choose and you say, yes, I want to live into that, or nope, sorry, grandpa, that at some point you say, I actually have a life that I want to choose. And then you set off down that path. And at some point also you realize that while fulfilling sort of isn't the life you want to get locked into. And I think it is so important that we recognize that we do have choice all along the way. You said a couple of things. You asked yourself two amazing questions. And I really want to highlight this because I think our audience could, as you're listening to this or watching this, I think that you could ask yourself this question. What if I could be a good leader? What if is a really great question. What if I could be a good leader? That's huge. The other one is, and this is a passion of mine. How much longer will I put off this dream? How much longer will I put off this dream? I call it listening to whispers, that at some point your heart starts talking to you and you go, well, I'm feeling pulled, but all the shoulds are pushing me over here, but I'm feeling pulled. And I think the question of really, how much longer will I put off this dream where I'm being pulled toward, where you're listening to the whispers that are saying over here, and you're like, no, I should go this way. I love that you asked that question. And I love that you stepped into then. It was almost your area of pain, that you didn't run from conflict. You said, I must deal with it. And I think that that's huge too. And I just, as I do interviews with various people, I love to pause and go, this part of your journey is pretty amazing. And where, your pain point was conflict. And it was conflict with bosses. It was conflict with a roommate. It was ultimately it was conflict with yourself. And to step in and go, okay, I'm kind of an expert in this now.
Yeah.
Right. So you developed actually a business based on conflict resolution. Here's what's interesting, by the way, backing up into a piece that's in your bio, though you haven't mentioned it yet, is the salsa dancing. Salsa requires you to be a leader. Right? That, the bicycle touring requires that you just get super focused and you have persistence. Pedal, 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 head down, go. Salsa dancing requires leadership and continuous learning and continuous improvement. Can you talk about that as a process for you, as an overlay for learning conflict resolution? Because I am 100% certain that it overlaps and interweaves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there is no doubt that the parallel tracks start to intertwine and they actually complement each other very well. The salsa dancing journey involves a switch from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, just like my willingness to step into identity as a leader. Because when I first learned salsa dancing, the lesson was terrible. But if you don't know that's a terrible lesson, you just think you're bad at it. So you're like, I must not be good at this, as opposed to, no, that was a bad lesson. And it wasn't until halfway through pharmacy school when a friend of mine said, hey, you have to give it another shot. Like, take some real lessons and, see what happens. And by then, my grades had congealed to a point where I could spend a little more time taking a break. And so, I actually took some lessons, actually started to get good at it. And then it took many years, to actually have the right mindset and confidence, just because I wasn't practicing enough. And so I would lose confidence, get rusty, but I would miss it. And that was an unproductive cycle. And it wasn't until about 9 years ago when that skill set stayed dormant until, a friend invited me to a free salsa dancing event in downtown Houston. And I saw one skilled, pretty blonde, and I said, I got to dance with her. And then I just threw everything I could on the dance floor and felt so alive, asked myself why I stayed away from it for so long. And then I said, nope, I have to make this a part of my life again. So that's that. And how that translates into conflict resolution is the willingness to, number one, lead, know that you have to control the narrative or dictate the narrative. You have to dictate the direction of the conversation. And literally you have to think on your feet, because as anyone in this space knows, no plan survives attack by reality. And so when things go off the rails, how well can you improv, right? How well can you improvise to still find a way to get your points across? And the only way you get better at improvising is to improvise more. And so between being creative, between improvising, between keeping your eye on the target, or at least having, and you could even look at it like chess, right? You need to stay a couple moves ahead. That's another fun thing, that it all just throw it all in the giant conflict resolution, soup recipe, right? Those are all elements that you can get a taste of, even though some people like to emphasize one over the other.
That's great. I, again, from my notes as you're talking, I love this part. Salsa requires leadership, years of getting good at it. Your screen is frozen again, just so you know.
No. Gosh.
Years of getting good at it, which means that you have persistence. And I think that is something that you just have to recognize as a human, that you don't start out great at something. You might have a love for it. You might have a propensity towards it, that it might be something you're kind of good at. To get really great at something, it does take practice, and it takes stepping in. Salsa also gave you the kind of understanding that you have to have a willingness to lead. And I love that. And literally thinking on your feet, right? The improv is a piece of the leadership piece. It's a piece of the dancing piece, and having fun is all part of it. And I also love no plan survives reality. And that is the point of real leadership, I think, is that having a plan, having an outcome in mind, but not being so tied to this is going to happen, then this, then this, then this. I joke that there are some people that when they plan picnics, they are so tied to exactly 6 ants will walk across the tablecloth at this point, that they miss the idea that there's a beautiful picnic. If there's only 4 ants, or if there's 12 ants, if the exact spoon you wanted isn't there, so you plan a picnic and the wind picks up. Okay, then what? Right. So that's your life. That is, each of us have this life. And you called it improv, the ability to improv. Recognizing that you do that on purpose is a leadership skill. Right. And you got through conflict and you got into coaching, and especially Asian American coaching, for people in conflict who are at a place of, I don't know what to do. Talk about some of the things, first of all, some of the people you're dealing with. And secondly, what are some of the key issues? Because they go beyond any ethnic group, right? It's your specialty is Asian Americans. That's awesome. I think each of us can learn from any of the circumstances that you've dealt with, and how you've provided guidance. Can you go into that just a little bit?
Yeah. Let me share some very concrete examples of, real client situations, right? So one client worked for a boss who was passive aggressive. I like to play around in the gray, so that, if we wanted to get mad at you, you could always find something. At one point, she was out to dinner with friends after hours. He tried calling her. She lets the call go to voicemail. And the next day, he just blows up at her and just questions her commitment to the company. Well, how dare you ignore my call? That's entirely disrespectful. If I need you, it doesn't matter how urgent the issue is. You need to, be responsive. And, she asked me, how in the world do I possibly restore this relationship, but not let my frustrations boil over to the point where he might fire me if I set off the wrong tripwire, right? And so that specific case is special because that helped me design the framework that I give away on my website. And so the first step we walked through was to imagine what a successful conversation would sound like. Are you looking for an apology? Are you looking to hold him to clearer standards? Like, what do you exactly want out of this conversation, right? Envision what you think should happen and believe that it's possible. Doesn't have to be likely, it just needs to be possible. The second step is to find 10 seconds of courage to set up a time to talk or to initiate the conversation. So whether you pick up the phone, send that email, send that text, the goal for conflict averse people like myself and the people I need to help or feel called to help is that you set the boulder in motion and lock the gate behind you. Because our first instinct is to rationalize and downplay and procrastinate, right? Maybe let me just sleep on it another day. Maybe I'm just still a little too angry. Let me calm down a little bit. Well, it's like, well, even if you're already calm, like what's one more day going to do for you? Not a lot. Your resentment is probably going to boil over, right? So set the boulder in motion. Don't give yourself a way out to backtrack. Okay, hey, is now a good time to talk? Okay. Some people like to script before they initiate this, and some people like to initiate and then start to improvise because you already have an idea. But the point is, you want to set up something to hold yourself accountable. The third step we walked through was to script your critical phrases to say, okay, what specifically do you want to address, right? What do you want to say? How do you think he'll respond? And then how will you counter his counters, right? You want to be able to get your thoughts out on paper and get them organized in a cohesive manner because you don't want to trust that you'll remember everything in the moment. You want to prepare your script. Step 4 is to rehearse these critical moves, right? Train in the dojo before you fight on the street, get some reps on the practice field before you step out into the game. Role play with a friend. Check yourself in front of a mirror, record yourself on your phone. Make sure you don't trip over your words when it counts. And then step 5, follow through, right? That follow through, I was thinking about how to really expand and flesh out these steps early today, actually. I said, what does it mean to follow through? Well, improv, right? Like come up with metaphors to get your point across. Or, there are certain things to say, hey, you know what, if he's not responsive to your initial attempt, okay, get curious. Hey, I'm sensing that, there's a little hesitation here. What, can you tell me what's going on? Right? You want to come up with phrases like, I'm sorry things aren't better between us. And that's a whole nother thing where you have phrases that illustrate that you're just trying to get to the heart of the issue and not trying to make this a personal attack. And so like once we walked her through that, yeah, I remember just the email I got after she had the conversation and she said, yeah, I'm definitely going to quit the company in a couple of months after I have enough, saved enough money on my own, but I don't know how I would have gotten this conversation without your help. Right.
Oh, that's
so,
great.
Yeah. So,
great.
Yeah. So that's one example. Anyway. Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to highlight some key points here.
Yeah.
My background is clinical psychology. So working with everybody from couples to, at this point, almost 40 years ago, taking a left turn into leadership development and working with companies and executives at all levels. Nice. What you're doing is defined as working agreements. You're setting working agreements. So conflict resolution is really about how do we agree to engage with each other, right? You talked about this leader who calls and is upset that this subordinate isn't responsive at all hours. Well, what are the working agreements? What are the expectations? I love that you started with, well, what's your desired outcome, right? What do you want out of this conversation? Is it an apology? Is it a different working agreement? Is it pay? Right? If I pick up the phone, you're going to pay me for that time, or right? So what is your desired outcome? Find 10 seconds of courage. That used to be a rule that we talked about, and I'm so glad you brought it up. I haven't heard that phrase in a really long time. And if you think about it, it really is 8 to 10 seconds of true courage to state what it is that you believe in. And it is so important to remember that it's not like you're going into a long-term battle. All you have to do is say what you believe in, and that takes 8 to 10 seconds. So finding that 10 seconds of courage is
Mhm.
huge. You talked about what I would call the 24-hour rule, which
Okay.
is if you're a hothead, do wait 24 hours.
Mhm.
If you're the ostrich and bury your head in the sand and maybe it'll go away, or maybe
Mhm.
they'll die and I won't have to, deal with this or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
that you owe it to yourself to take care of it within 24 hours.
There you go.
Right. And
I
so
love it.
if you're the hothead, wait. If you're avoidant, push yourself.
There you go.
You know you are bigger than the life you are leading. It really is time to attend to that thing you've wanted to do or have, but you've been putting off. It's time to step into that dream you've parked for someday. It's time to claim true well-being, both personally and professionally, without giving up the success that got you here. It's time to check out Dr. Pernell's signature small group retreat, the Exponential Success Summit. Explore exponentialsuccesssummit.com. Seats are extremely limited as this is a very special small group event. www.exponentialsuccesssummit.com.
You talked about scripting critical phrases and staying ahead. And what came to mind again was something you referenced earlier, which was chess, right? Scripting critical phrases. It's so important. A la chess, you want to know where you're going. So what phrases are you going to say to kind of guide the conversation? Rehearse that. And rehearse it. I'm going to add a +1 to what you said, which is rehearse it in various ways. So you could rehearse it with true compassion. You could rehearse it and be very direct and very forceful. Right? Or you could rehearse it as a question, as an inquiry, right? And have those as various kinds of forms of, this really matters to me. I'm wondering, or this is my demand, right? And it's like, get really clear, ground yourself there. So I love all of that. You've got this really grounded place, and then follow through. And the truth is, follow through means different things to different people. And it really gets back to what's your desired outcome. You follow through to the point that you get the outcome you wanted, or you reach an agreement either with the other person or yourself that, all right, we got a reasonable outcome. It wasn't sometimes people go into conflict going, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell that guy what I think of him, and he's going to apologize and pay me a ton of money after he apologizes. And you get to a point of, the person says, I didn't realize I was being an ass. It's like, I didn't know that calling you was going to bug you that much. Sorry. And that could be the outcome. That could be exactly what's needed. And again, this is all about working agreements. You do it in your house, you do it at work, you can do it in the community. And I think it's really important. So good steps. I sort of, put my kind of interpretation all over that. And I love it. I love that you walk people through this. This is awesome. Do you have another example? And do you mind if I interpret?
Of course we want. This is what we serve up. They make this a really really nice steak dinner, right? We want to give them some substance. Another great example that comes to mind. Another Asian leader. He recently got promoted, and he inherited the team that included a guy who was been with the company for like 10 years. Got passed over for promotions with his two previous supervisors, and was upset at the fact that he didn't get a promotion yet, even though he felt like he deserved one at this point. But when my client had dug a little deeper, he realized that that both supervisors tried to go over feedback with him on things that he needed to improve upon, But every time they did, he would just lock up and get defensive. And, maybe he just didn't like the feeling of feeling inadequate, or he just didn't like to admit that maybe he needed improvement or something. But, so this leader comes to me and he's asking me, how do I get him to take my feedback seriously? Right. Because I don't want to promote him just because he wants the promotion. Right. He's like, that would reflect poorly on me. And so similarly, we walked through the framework just to say, well, what do you want this conversation to, how do you want this to play out? Right. Is it, hey, I'm going to lay this on you and you just have to accept it? That's one outcome. Maybe not the best one, but it is realistic. Maybe you show him that you want him to have this promotion and it's going to involve some really difficult but necessary prerequisites. If you can sell yourself as an advocate, would that help the situation? Right. And so now he's starting to play around with scenarios to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this could go well if he makes sure he doesn't see me as like this obstacle, this gatekeeper versus like this person that's like, this will help. They design a launching pad to help him, take off. Right. And we also had to make sure that he understood, hey, like put a tripwire in place to say, as soon as he locks up, tell him that the conversation is over. Ask for his permission. Hey, I need to go over some things that may feel uncomfortable, but are necessary, but they're difficult. Are you willing to go through that? Like ask for his permission to discuss them. That way he's not being blindsided. Right. So we're starting to put all this on the table. Right. And that helps, right, with the second step, which is what would make those 10 seconds of courage easier to drum up, right? Is part of it is framing yourself as an advocate and not an adversary, right? So that's one way to do it. And then, I kind of went out of order, but we script some critical phrases. We anticipated, okay, if he has a pattern of defensiveness, how do we want to counter it, right? Hey, is there someone else on your team that can keep this confidential that you can practice with, right? And then, hey, let me know how it goes. And the wrinkle I'm going to add on this one is that when you follow through, I realize that part of the maturation is to recognize you'd rather have tried and failed than to not try at all, right? Because trying and failing gives you an experience to evaluate. And people don't realize what kind of gift that is. It took me a long time to realize, hey, you know what? Failure doesn't mean you're done. Failure means you're not done, right? Failure means you're just not at the finish line yet. And so I warned him, this may not go well. We may plan all this and have all these great ideas, and he may still lock up. And at the very least, you can make it very clear, hey, if you're going to lock up, that's fine. It's your choice. And here are the consequences if you choose to continue to lock up, right? I cannot advocate for you if you do not, if you aren't willing to discuss my feedback in earnest in order to actually become the kind of leader management wants you to be. So,
this is huge. I'm thinking about adolescence as you are saying all of this, that, coming in and being somebody's advocate versus adversary is huge. Yeah. And to recognize or to get agreement that you are being that for the other person, and all behavior has consequence. Yeah. And that it really is the choice of the other person. How do you want to show up? How do you want to be? Love this. I want to underscore again, some brilliance there, Dr. Jerry. This is awesome. Truly, just really good. The whole idea of, how do I get somebody to take what I'm saying seriously is about the approach. And, your suggestion to ask for permission to discuss something, it puts the other person, just in terms of negotiation, it puts the other person in control. Can I offer you some feedback? Do I have permission to bring something up that is bothering me? Is it okay with you if I say something that's bothering me? Versus, can I give you some feedback? Can I tell you what's wrong with you? Can I, just own it? Do I have permission to share something that's been bugging me? That's huge. So asking permission to discuss is a big thing. And how you approach that is also really important. because that's where you define whether you're an advocate or an adversary.
Mhm.
Do I have permission to tell you what's wrong with you is so different than do I have permission to share with you
Mhm.
what's bothering me?
Mhm.
Huge distinction. I want to celebrate this sentence big
Mhm.
time. Like, do you know the brilliance that I'm about to celebrate? You ready?
I've already forgotten it, so go for it.
Okay. You said it just so casually.
Yeah.
And you were just like, and it's this: failure doesn't mean you're done.
Mhm.
It means you're not done. And
Yeah.
I just love that so much. I love that so much. That could be a t-shirt, that is so good. I might do my own blog post just based on that statement. And it's like, that's awesome. Take that, like, again, I mean, I highlight it for the audience because in a conversation, it's hard sometimes if you're just listening or if you're watching, it's hard to go, oh, that was good. Maybe I'll remember that. I highlight things specifically in my conversations with people so that it's clear. Failure doesn't mean you're done. It means you're not done. Fantastic. Really good. Really good. This is awesome. Well, you mentioned a framework. You mentioned that you had a website. Should we talk about going to adaptingleaders.com?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to give people a rundown. Yeah. All the goodies happen at the website, adaptingleaders.com. For the specific guide, you can go adaptingleaders.com/guide. There's also a blog that's free where I like to summarize interesting and useful leadership books, or, maybe I just, go on a coaching rant, with five, I do have a fun post on 5 ways dancing helps you become a better leader off the dance floor, so that's a fun one.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then, we want to schedule a 30-minute call, on the house just to get a taste of coaching, see what it can do for you. Sure, man, it's all there.
That's awesome. Jerry, tell me, you mentioned the dojo, and a lot of people don't know that, when you practice on a dojo, the saying for me was you die 1,000 times on the mat so that you don't die out on the street. What art form did you study?
I did Kung Fu growing up,
That's awesome.
and I mean, it did. I wish it paid more dividends now, Dr. Wayne, because, at some point, some friends taught me, because the art itself is great. And a friend who was also in the martial arts made a great distinction where he said, martial arts aren't for self-defense, they're for self-development. But, in the end of the day, you still want to know how to spar, in case someone, say someone needs, if it comes down to that. Because, I mean, the nice thing is you recognize that actual real life fights are quick and dirty, and it's not like the choreographed things that you see on movies, right? And they brandish the knife for dramatic effect, and then you realize in real life you don't find out about who has a knife until it's too late, right? Like they've already stabbed you. So
it could come out of nowhere.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. So I mean,
no, it is true, and it's interesting because this goes back to conflict resolution. It's great. I started studying Kung Fu when I was 12, and then I shifted to Shotokan karate and Aikijutsu and Aikido with traditional weapons as well. So that's been a long journey, and my start was Kung Fu. Nice. It was great, and along the way, pretty much all of the philosophy, and this ties back to conflict resolution. All of the philosophy about self-development through the martial arts was the best fight is the one that you're not in, right? You're not training to be in a fight. You're training not to be in a fight.
Yeah.
Right. That it's like, you train in martial arts so that you never have to use martial arts.
Yeah.
And that's the when you learn conflict resolution skills, it's the exact same thing. If you understand how conflict works, you can enter a conversation in a way where there actually is no conflict, because you're entering where the other person is and guiding it versus colliding with it.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very round style, circular style of engagement.
Yeah.
I said that I learned Shotokan, which is very linear, and Aikido and Aikijitsu, which is very round and circular, and the entry and the use of energy is very similar in conflict resolution. Right? Where's the other person's intent, and what's your intent, and how do you match that, and how do you move that? And that's where it becomes magical. And I love that you've got that grounding. I love that you use salsa. I love that you use your own development along the way, because it is so potent and important. And the other thing around coaching is that you come through something and now you have a perspective that you can offer others. One of the things that I recommend for those seeking coaching is to make sure that the coach isn't still trying to heal by providing coaching to others, that you've actually come through it. You're at a place of, I see it, I have a perspective. Yes, I'm still growing, but my perspective is such I can guide you. A lot of new coaches are like, they're just so emotionally involved that it's not great coaching. You've come through it. You speak about your experiences from a place of perspective, not a place of, those darn jobs I had and and it's like, you understand what happened in those jobs, and you understand who you are as a coach when people come to you. So I think it's really great. And you smile when you talk about your blogs, which I think is also great. That it's like you have love for the content that you produce, and I always look for that. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention your website one more time.
Sure.
And then it's called adaptingleaders.com, adaptingleaders.com/guide if you want Jerry's guide. Anything else? Is there something you were hoping I would ask you that I didn't? Is there a point you were hoping to make that we didn't get to yet?
I could throw on, this is more of a spur of the moment kind of thing. I thought we covered things pretty well. And it's like you talk about chi, right? And you talk about just, it's less about force and more about finesse, right? When you realize, hey, you don't have to force anything. Very rarely will that go in your favor. Because you can force something. I've done it before and it didn't work out well. And even if you get the result you want in the short term, you lose the relationship long term. And I think it's just such a beautiful conversation when this is a dance like any other, right? It's like, okay, what happened here? So I just want to say, thank you for this space where we can just kind of express ourselves in improv and co-create a conversation that I hope pays dividends for your audience. Yeah.
I am certain that there are nuggets that are being taken away today. So yeah. I appreciate you. I appreciate your being here. It's interesting. I won't say never. I very seldom get a chance to meet the guests that I have on. We communicate via website and via email, and it's like, sounds like fun. Let's do this. Yeah. And we did co-create, and that is that in itself is a lesson in that when you co-create with somebody, you have the courage, and that courage comes from, I believe I'll figure it out. Right? This person isn't that there's a trust in the other person, and most important, that there's a trust in yourself, and that that is part of the dance. And it goes beyond our current topic, and that is the topic of you can meet whoever you want, you can talk to whoever you want, you can find your voice in whatever situation because you believe in yourself. And a la the martial arts, you keep your center even if chaos is happening around you. You keep your center. So really great, Jerry. Thank you so much for being here. Adaptingleaders.com/guide, Dr. Jerry Fu. Thank you for being here. Really a pleasure.
Thanks, Dr. Wayne. Yeah, loved it.
Loved it too. Thank you. Well, this is One Sharp Sword Cutting Through to What Matters Most. I've been your host, Dr. Wayne Pernell, the Exponential Success Coach. With me today, Dr. Jerry Fu. All righty. We will see you here next time.